My name is Harold Mercer. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years fixing broken water mains for the city of Spokane. I can smoke a brisket tender enough to make a Baptist deacon forget his diet. And until last spring I would have sworn under oath that the life I had built was plain, honest, and mean. Then my granddaughter opened a rusted coffee tin in my garage. And in less than 10 minutes, I learned that one of my children had a different father. My wife had been paid to keep quiet, and a man running on integrity had buried a scandal under my own roof for 36 years. Welcome back to Dad's Slant Justice. Before we start, comment where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read those comments more than you think. And subscribe to the channel, because sometimes one click from you helps a small channel like ours keep telling stories about fathers who refuse to fold. It began on a rainy Saturday in April. The kind of Spokane rain that doesn't fall dramatically so much as hang in the air and make every joint in your body write a complaint letter. My granddaughter Lily was home from Washington State University for the weekend. She was 20. Smart, curious, and dangerous. In that quiet way, young people are dangerous when they know how to search the internet better than you know how to turn off your printer. She was making an audio project for one of her classes about family objects. She asked if she could look through the garage for anything old, meaningful, or weird. I told her she was welcome to all three. That garage had enough dust, old tools, Christmas lights, and forgotten regret to fill a museum. My wife Ruth was at a baby shower for her niece out in Spokane Valley. Ruth and I had been married 39 years. She was the woman who knew exactly how much pepper I liked on my eggs, the woman who still wrote birthday cards by hand, the woman who had once driven through a snowstorm to bring me dry socks when a main broke on Division Street. I had no reason to worry about anything. I was in the kitchen, listening to the Mariners game on the radio, pretending I was going to clean the gutters later, which was a lie I told both myself and the house. Lily had been in the garage maybe 25 minutes when the sound stopped. You know how a house has different kinds of quiet. There is peaceful, quiet, lazy quiet. Everybody is doing their own thing quiet. This was not that. This was the quiet that comes after someone reads one sentence too many. I turned down the radio. A minute later, Lily came into the kitchen holding an old coffee tin. The red Folgers kind, dented on one side and taped shut with silver duct tape, so old it had gone stiff at the edges. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide open. That scared me more than tears would have. "Grandpa," she said. "Who is Grant Whitaker?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel. I hadn't heard that name in decades, but my body knew it before my mouth did. Grant Whitaker had owned one of the biggest development companies in eastern Washington. He had been rich when rich men still wore gold watches that looked heavy enough to leave bruises. I said, "Why are you asking me that?" She set the coffee tin on the table like it might explode if she moved too fast. "Because his name is on papers in here," she said. "And Mom's name is there too." "Not my mom. Your wife, Grandma Ruth." I opened the tin. Inside were 18 letters, 2 lab reports, a small stack of bank deposit slips, and a folded memo on Whitaker Development letterhead. The letters were addressed to Ruth. They were not from me. They were from Grant Whitaker. The dates ran from late 1986 through 1989. The handwriting was smooth and arrogant, all long loops and hard slants. The handwriting of a man who expected a signature to solve problems. I read the first line of one letter and felt my stomach drop so fast I thought I might actually fall out of my chair. It said, "Ruth, I know Harold believes the boy is his, but belief will not protect either of us if the records are found." Lily sat across from me, both hands wrapped around a glass of water she had not touched. I kept reading. The first lab report was dated February 1988. It wasn't one of those modern DNA printouts. It was an old paternity report using blood typing and HLA markers, the kind people used before every family secret had a website waiting to expose it. The child's name was Matthew Allen Mercer, my oldest, my son, the man who had my laugh, my temper, and my habit of measuring twice and still cutting once. The report listed me as the presumed father, then it listed Grant Whitaker as the tested father. The conclusion was written in calm, professional language that felt like a shovel hitting bone. The second report was worse because it was not about family. It was about money. There were monthly deposits to an account in Ruth's name, beginning 3 months before Matthew was born and continuing for nearly 2 years. The deposits came from a company called Riverbend Administrative Services. I had never heard of it. The memo explained why. Riverbend, according to the memo, had been set up to move private payments related to the Riverside Heights development project without linking them to Whitaker Development's regular books. At the bottom of the memo was a sentence that made the room tilt. Keep Ruth satisfied. Keep Mercer uninformed. And keep Benson away from the soil report. I looked at Lily. She looked 12 years old for half a second. Though she was 20 and tougher than most adults I knew. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "is Dad not really your son?" Her dad was Matthew, my firstborn. I took one breath, then another. I said, "Lily, whatever those papers say, your dad is my son." She nodded, but the relief didn't reach her eyes. Because a sentence like that can be true and still not solve anything. I put the papers back in the tin, then took them out again because I suddenly didn't trust anything to stay where it belonged. There are moments when your life does not break loudly. It doesn't shatter like a plate. It just changes shape without asking permission. I had spent 37 years looking at Matthew and seeing pieces of myself. The way he stood with his hands on his hips when he was thinking, the way he refused to buy cheap screws, the way he could not leave a crooked picture frame alone, sitting at my kitchen table. I wondered how many resemblances I had invented because love needed them. And then I got angry at myself for wondering. Biology had not coached his Little League team. Biology had not sat in a hospital chair when he broke his wrist at 13. Biology had not taught him how to back a trailer into a narrow driveway while his mother yelled helpful things from the porch. Ruth came home at 5:40. I remember the exact time because the kitchen clock ticked louder than normal that day. Lily had gone to the den after I told her she didn't need to carry the first impact of this with me. She went, but she left her backpack by the table like a witness. Ruth walked in smelling like rain, perfume, and frosting from the baby shower. She kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted coffee, and then saw the tin. Her face did something I had never seen it do. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like the past had stepped into the room and taken off its coat. "Where did you find that?" she asked. Her voice was thin. "Lily found it in the garage." Ruth closed her eyes. "Not for long." "But long enough," I said. "Is Matthew my biological son?" She sat down without being told. That was answer number 1. I asked again because some truths need to be forced to stand in the light. "Is Matthew my biological son?" "Ruth." She put one hand over her mouth. And for a second, I saw the woman I married at 25. Young and scared and full of secrets she hadn't yet decided to call secrets. "No," she whispered. I heard myself say, "How long have you known?" she said. "Since before he was born. That is a strange thing. Hearing your wife reduce your life to a timeline. Since before he was born. Not after a mistake. Not after confusion. Not after years of doubt. Before." She said Grant and I had been going through a rough season. She said it was only a few months. She said she ended it because she chose me. I almost laughed. I did not. Because the sound that would have come out of me would not have been sane. "You chose me," I said, "but you let me raise another man's child without telling me I had a choice." Ruth cried then. Ruth had always cried quietly. She never used tears like a weapon, which somehow made them harder to ignore. I had spent almost 4 decades moving toward those tears. That night, I stayed where I was. She told me Grant had insisted the truth would ruin everyone. He had money, lawyers, influence. He told her I would leave. He told her Matthew would be marked forever. He told her he could protect us, which is what men like Grant say when they mean they can control you. The payments, Ruth said, were for Matthew. Diapers, medical bills, the down payment help on our first house. I said, "We bought that house with your father's insurance money and overtime from the city." She looked down. "Not all of it," she said. That answer landed in me colder than the paternity report. Because now the lie wasn't only in my family album. It was in my mortgage. I asked about the memo. Ruth shook her head too quickly. I never understood the business papers. She said, Grant gave me copies. He said if he ever tried to take Matthew from us, I could use them. I kept them because I was scared. I asked who Benson was. She said she thought he was a county inspector. Grant hated him. That was all she knew. Or all she could say while sitting at a kitchen table with her husband looking at her like she had become a stranger wearing a familiar face. I wanted to yell. I wanted to put my fist through the pantry door. Instead, I picked up the tin and said, I'm going for a drive. Ruth asked where. I said, somewhere I don't have to look at you. I drove to the parking lot by Manitou Park and sat there until it got dark. I did cry. I don't mind telling you that. Men who tell you they never cry are either lying or dangerously clogged. I cried because I was angry. I cried because I loved Matthew. I cried because I had loved Ruth in a steady, ordinary, workday kind of way that felt more permanent than romance. And now even the ordinary things had fingerprints on them. Then, after the crying stopped, something else arrived. Not peace. Not forgiveness. A colder kind of usefulness. I wiped my face with a napkin from the glove box, took out my phone, and made my first call. The call was to Denise Carver, my old neighbor from years back. Denise had spent 28 years as a records clerk at the county courthouse before retiring and becoming the kind of woman who could find a missing deed faster than most people find their car keys. I said, Denise, do you still know people who know where old property records go to hide? She said, Harold Mercer. That is either the most boring question or the most dangerous question you have ever asked me. I told her the name Riverbend Administrative Services. I told her Riverside Heights. I told her the dates. 1987 through 1990. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Give me 3 days. And don't do anything stupid before I call you back. I did not tell Matthew yet. That was the hardest decision of those first days. And maybe the one people will judge me for. But I needed facts. I was not going to walk into my son's life carrying a half-built bomb. Matthew was 37. A commercial contractor with 2 kids. A bad shoulder. And a marriage that had survived one ugly year by sheer stubbornness. He deserved truth. But he deserved truth arranged in a way that would not slice him open unnecessarily. I told Lily the same. She hated waiting. But she understood. She had found the tin. She was not a child in this story anymore. Whether I liked it or not. Denise called me on the 4th day. Because apparently retired women with county contacts move faster than government itself. What she found turned my private disaster into something bigger. Riverbend Administrative Services had been connected to Whitaker Development through a registered agent who also handled several limited liability companies. One of those companies had purchased parcels for Riverside Heights, a hillside subdivision north of the river. In the late 1980s, the problem was the slope. Old soil reports had warned that part of the hillside needed expensive stabilization before building could continue. A county inspector named Paul Benson had objected to the permits. He wrote 3 memos. Then he was transferred. The permits were approved. And the final report somehow stopped mentioning the worst part of the slope. The numbers were not small. Whitaker Development saved roughly $740,000 by avoiding the stabilization work. The development sold fast. Homes went up. Families moved in. And years later, several of those houses had foundation problems that were blamed on ordinary settling. 2 homeowners had sued, but the cases settled quietly. Riverbend's accounts showed payments to Ruth, payments to a consultant, and payments that Denise described as suspicious enough to make a sleeping auditor sit up straight. The folded memo in my coffee tin was not just blackmail insurance. It was a map, and my wife had kept that map behind old paint cans and a box of Christmas angels for nearly 4 decades. Grant Whitaker was 68 by then. He was no longer just a developer. He was running for Spokane County Commissioner on a platform of clean growth, safe neighborhoods, and responsible stewardship. I wish I were inventing that last word. Stewardship. Men like Grant love words that sound like church and behave like camouflage. His campaign signs were all over town. Blue and white. His smile printed large enough to be seen from a moving car. Ruth had told me he was afraid the truth would hurt Matthew. Maybe part of that was true, but I was beginning to think Grant had been much more afraid of what those business papers could do to him. I met Denise at a diner near Sprague Avenue. She brought photocopies in a manila folder and ordered black coffee like we were spies in a movie made for people with arthritis. She said, "Harold, I am not a lawyer, but I know bad paperwork when I see it. This is bad paperwork." I asked, "Is it enough?" She said, "Enough for what I said. Enough to ruin him." She stirred her coffee once, then stopped. "If you take it to a newspaper, it ends his campaign. If the state auditor takes it seriously, it might end more than that. If any of the homeowners are still around and still angry, it could get ugly." I said, "Ugly already happened. I'm just deciding who gets to see it. Grant found out before I moved. I still don't know whether Ruth called him or he had someone watching her. And at this point, I don't waste much time wondering." He arrived at my house on a Thursday afternoon in a black Lincoln Navigator that looked freshly washed by someone who hated themselves. He walked up my front path wearing a tan overcoat and the expression of a man arriving to settle a minor scheduling problem. Tall, silver-haired, expensive shoes. The whole catalog. I opened the door before he rang the bell. He smiled like we were both civilized. "Harold Mercer," he said. I said, "Grant Whitaker." Then I looked past him at the street. "You lose your invitation somewhere." He asked if we could talk. I said we could stand. That bothered him. I could tell because his smile tightened. He said Ruth was upset. I said Ruth had a talent for creating upsetting situations. He said this was a painful private matter. I said private ended when your company letterhead showed up in my garage. That was the first time his face changed. Only a flicker. But I saw it. He said, "I don't know what you think you found." I said, "Grant, I spent 31 years with city utility maps printed by men who wrote like raccoons with pencils. I can read a paper trail. Don't insult either one of us." Then the polish came off. Not all the way, but enough. He told me old records could be misunderstood. He told me Ruth had accepted money voluntarily. He told me Matthew's life could become complicated if careless accusations went public. There it was. Not a threat. Technically, men with lawyers rarely threaten directly. They simply place consequences on the table and ask you to admire the arrangement. I looked at him and thought about Matthew as a baby asleep on my chest after Ruth's emergency C-section. I thought about Little League dust on his uniform. I thought about him calling me Dad, in a voice that never once asked permission. I said, "Listen carefully. You don't contact Ruth. You don't contact Matthew. You don't contact Lily. You don't send a lawyer to my house. And you don't send one of your campaign volunteers pretending to check on me. If you do, copies of everything I have go to the Spokesman Review, the state auditor, and every homeowner in Riverside Heights whose foundation cracked while you were counting money." Grant stared at me. The good humor was gone now. He said, "You're making a mistake." I said, "No, Grant. I made a mistake for 36 years by trusting the wrong people. This is me correcting my paperwork." He left without another word. I watched the Navigator roll away. Then I called Denise and said, "We move now?" She asked, "Are you sure?" I said, "Denise, if I get any surer, I'll need a permit for it. If you're still listening, thank you. That means you're not just here for the secret. You're here for what people do after the secret. Comment your city and the time where you are. Because I swear those comments make this feel like a big kitchen table with people gathered around it. And if this story has your attention, subscribe to Dad's Sliant Justice. It may seem small to you, but it tells the channel to keep going. I told Matthew on a Sunday morning. I chose Sunday because there is no good day to tell a man his origin story has a hole in it. But Sunday at least gives everybody the illusion of softness. Ruth was there. Lily was there because Matthew asked why she sounded strange on the phone. And I refused to lie to cover a lie. We sat in the living room. I had the coffee tin on the table. Matthew looked at it, then at me. He knew before I said much. Sons know the weather in their father's face. I told him the truth as carefully as a person can hand broken glass to someone they love. I told him about Ruth and Grant. I told him about the old lab report. I told him there were business documents too. but that none of that changed the first thing that mattered. He listened without interrupting. Matthew was always like that when something hit hard. His face goes still. His eyes get darker. When I finished, he did not ask about Grant. He did not ask about money. He did not even look at Ruth at first. He looked at me and said, "Do you still want me as your son?" I had prepared for anger. I had prepared for shouting. I had prepared for him walking out. I had not prepared for that. I stood up because some answers should not be given sitting down. I put both hands on his shoulders and said, "Matthew, I wanted you before I knew how much wanting a child could change a man. I wanted you when you were 6 pounds and angry at the entire hospital. I wanted you when you wrecked my truck at 17 and tried to blame black ice in August. I want you now. I will want you when my name is on a stone. There is no report. No Richmond. No mistake your mother made that gets to vote on that." He broke then, not dramatically, just folded forward and cried into my shirt like he was a boy again and had finally found permission. Lily cried. Ruth cried from across the room, but Matthew was not ready to look at her. When she said his name, he held up a hand. Not cruelly, just enough. "Mom," he said. "Not today. I can't carry you today." She nodded. For all my anger at Ruth, I will say this. She accepted that sentence, maybe because she knew it was more mercy than she deserved. Matthew asked if I was going after Grant. I said yes. He asked if I was doing it for him. I thought about that. Then I said, partly, but mostly I'm doing it because men like Grant survive when everybody decides the truth is too messy to clean up. Matthew nodded. He said, "I don't want special treatment." I said, "Good. Because I'm fresh out." That made him laugh through his tears. And that tiny laugh saved the room from collapsing entirely. The package went out 11 days later. Denise helped assemble it. A retired attorney she trusted looked at it and told me what to include and what to leave out so nobody could accuse us of guessing where documents already spoke clearly. The final packet was 72 pages. It had copies of the letters, the paternity report, the Riverbend deposit slips, the Riverside Heights memo, old permit summaries, Barcel records, and a timeline so clean even a man trying not to understand it would have trouble. I wrote the cover letter myself at the kitchen table. Ruth was staying with her sister by then. The house felt too big, but it also felt honest in a way it hadn't before. Grant had a campaign fundraising dinner scheduled at the historic Davenport Hotel on a Friday night. 400 people were expected. Business owners, county donors, consultants, retired officials, and at least 3 reporters who liked free chicken more than they liked speeches. I did not attend. I own one suit, and it is for funerals and reluctant weddings. Instead, at 3:30 that afternoon, a courier delivered identical packets to the Spokesman Review, the Washington State Auditor's Office, and a law firm representing one of the Riverside Heights homeowners from an old settlement, Atrei Patruzeci, Chichinch. Denise emailed a digital copy to a reporter she described as young enough to still be hungry and old enough to know what a land record meant. The story broke online Saturday morning. By noon, Grant's campaign had postponed all public events. By Monday, his clean growth slogan had become a joke. People were making in comment sections with more creativity than kindness. By Tuesday, the county announced it would review the historical permitting process tied to Riverside Heights. By Wednesday, 2 former Whitaker employees had contacted the paper. One of them had a box of files in a storage unit in Post Falls. People always think secrets disappear. They don't. They wait in basements, garage, storage units. And the guilty part of somebody's memory, Grant withdrew from the race the following Thursday. His statement cited family concerns and the need to focus on personal matters. I admired the nerve of that phrase. Personal matters. A man can hide a mountain inside 2 polite words if he has practiced long enough, but the campaign was only the first wall to fall. Whitaker Development lost a pending county infrastructure management contract 3 weeks later after officials reopened the bidding process. The annual value was about $3. 6 million. It involved road-adjacent drainage, retaining wall repairs, and emergency site work. the kind of unglamorous public contract that keeps a construction firm breathing for years. The winning bidder was not some giant company from Seattle. It was Mercer, Pine Construction. The small firm Matthew had spent 6 years building with his partner Andre Pine. Before anybody in the comments starts yelling, "No, I did not arrange that. I did not call a council member. I did not whisper in a hallway. I barely had enough influence to get the city to fix the pothole at the end of my street. And even that took 8 months." Matthew's company had bid on that same category of work twice before and lost to Whitaker-linked firms both times. This time, with everybody suddenly allergic to Grant's shadow. The honest low bid looked very attractive. Matthew called me when the award notice came through. I was in the garage, because apparently trauma had turned me into a man who cleans shelves at random. He said, "Dad, before I tell you, I need you to answer one thing. Did you have anything to do with this?" I said. "No. I gave documents to people whose job is to care. That is all." He was quiet. Then he exhaled so hard I could hear years leaving him. "Good," he said. "I wanted it clean." I said, "Then take clean and build something with it." He told me the first retaining wall they repaired under that contract would be named the Mercer Wall in the project folder. I told him that was the dumbest honor I had ever received, and also I wanted a picture. He laughed. Real laughter. The kind of laugh a father stores away because it proves the child is still reachable. Now, I would love to tell you everything healed because Grant fell and Matthew won a contract and Justice wore a work jacket instead of a robe. But life is not that tidy. And I try not to lie anymore, even for comfort. Ruth and I are separated. Not divorced yet. Maybe we will be. Maybe we won't. 39 years does not vanish because one truth walked in with muddy boots, but it does change where people sleep. It changes which coffee cup you use. It changes whether silence feels peaceful or loaded. Some mornings I miss her so badly I hate myself for it. Some afternoons I remember the tin and feel my chest close like a fist. Both are true. Matthew is in counseling. He told me that on his own. I didn't push. He is angry at Ruth, curious about Grant, in a way he does not want to be, and fiercely protective of his children. He asked me once if he should meet Grant. I said, "That is not my decision." Then I said, "But if you do, eat first. Never face a rich liar on an empty stomach." He said that sounded like advice from a fortune cookie written by a plumber. I said, "Former water department supervisor." And he apologized with the proper respect. Lily finished her audio project. She changed the subject from family objects to family silence. Her professor gave her an A and asked if she would consider journalism. She called me from Pullman and said, "Grandpa, is it wrong that part of me is glad I found it?" I told her no. Hard truth is not the same as harm. Harm is what people do to keep truth buried. Finding it can hurt. But sometimes pain is the doorway out of a locked room. She went quiet. Then she said she was writing that down. Young people are always writing down the one sentence you didn't polish. As for Grant Whitaker, he still lives somewhere behind a gate on the South Hill. His company still exists, but smaller now. Quieter. I see his name occasionally in business notices, usually attached to phrases like restructuring, transition, and independent review. That is, corporate language for a man discovering gravity. I do not follow him closely. I don't need to. I saw what mattered. I saw the smile disappear from his campaign signs. I saw men who had once returned his calls quickly start letting them go to voicemail. Power is funny. It looks permanent, until everyone agrees to treat it like weather that has passed. Ruth wrote me a letter 2 months after she moved out. Not an email. A real letter. Because she knows me. She apologized without explaining, which was new. She said she had loved me and betrayed me, and that both truths had made a coward of her. I read it twice, then put it in a drawer. Not the garage. Not a tin. A drawer I open on purpose. That is the difference. I don't know yet what forgiveness will look like, or if it will ever look like the two of us at the same breakfast table again. But I know this. Secrets grow teeth in the dark. Truth hurts. But at least it uses the front door. People ask what I lost. I lost the story I had been telling myself about my marriage. I lost the comfort of believing loyalty is obvious just because it lasted a long time. I lost the version of Ruth who could do no serious wrong. Those are real losses. But I did not lose Matthew. I did not lose Lily. I did not lose myself. In fact, in the strangest way, I found out exactly who I was. I was the man who raised his son because love had already signed the papers. I was the man who could be broken and still organize the evidence. I was the man who learned that cold justice is not revenge for revenge's sake. It is giving truth a place to stand where everyone can see it. Last Sunday, Matthew came over with Lily and the kids. We grilled burgers because brisket takes planning and I was tired. My youngest, Nora, called from Boise and complained that nobody tells her anything until after the explosion. My middle child, Elise. I brought potato salad and the kind of steady calm that makes you wonder if daughters are born knowing how to supervise emotional disasters. For 2 hours, the house sounded like family again. Not the old family. Not the untouched family. A new one. Scarred but breathing. After everyone left, I stood in the garage and looked at the empty shelf where the coffee tin had been. I thought about sealing that space with something cheerful. Maybe a box of golf balls. Maybe Christmas lights that actually work. Then I decided to leave it empty for a while. Some spaces should stay open long enough to remind you what came out of them. So if you're sitting there with a secret in your house, your marriage, your family, or your own chest, hear me. The truth may cost you the version of life you were protecting, but the lie is already charging interest. And one day someone you love may open the wrong box and hand you the bill. When that day comes, be careful, be honest, be colder than your pain. And whatever you do not let the man who built the fire sell himself as the firefighter. If this story stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to Dad's Slant Justice for more raw, real, family-centered stories, and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and what time it is there. Sometimes a father telling the truth in Spokane needs to know somebody out there heard him.